Let me give you some other qualities of the divine masculine and how it's embodied and expressed in my everyday life. Some of these qualities are more subtle, more nuanced, and I can share some examples from my everyday life that will illuminate these qualities that are embodied and expressed. One quality is precision. This precision can show up in speech, it can show up as action, to move precisely, to act precisely. This precision really comes from clarity, which is another quality. The ability to see clearly. This clarity also is interrelated with discernment. To discern from this clarity what's true in this moment, what's needed in this moment. From this discernment, then I act precisely. This precision is like wielding the sword of truth. This action, whatever it may be, is swift. It's not rushed, but it's swift. It's clean. It's final. It's like taking that sword and piercing through the armor in the precise spot, the weak spot, or like the clean, clear cut that leaves no unfinished business. This precision is really not getting tied up in the drama. It's not messy, so I said it's clean. There's no strings attached, there's no unfinished business. There's a finality to it, there's a completion to it. Let me give you an example to make this more grounded for you. The other night, we're eating dinner, and I'm trying to think actually what happened. I asked my son to try something on his plate that we had a few nights ago, something similar, but this was different. So I didn't want him to judge what was on his plate by the previous experience. So I said, no, this is not the same thing. Try it. You might like it. And it's that invitation to open up, to try something. But he was judging it, and he snapped at me. It's the energy behind the words. Raised his voice, said something like, I already tried it, leave me alone, or something like this, and just kind of lashed out. So then, with that precision, I just simply got up. There was no aggression, there was no anger, there was no punishment, there's no sort of that aggressive type of energy. It's just this swift, clean, clear movement. I just got up, grabbed his plate, walked it over to the counter, and told him, we don't talk to each other like that. Leave the table. And that was it. That's the finality. Just a swift, clean, clear, precise action. which that action, because it's so precise, that action says more than words can. He doesn't need a lesson about respect. He doesn't need a lesson or some teaching about the standards that I hold, that at the table we don't speak like that. He doesn't need any sort of explanation. I don't need to justify the action. I don't need to explain myself. That's the messy stuff, right? That's the collapsing. So this is actually precision and another quality called containment, right? Which has to do with boundaries, not collapsing in that sort of chaotic energy that spins out, swirls. It's like a storm. I'm not raising my voice to match his reaction. It's not a reaction. Precision is always a response. So it's just simply a response, right? The ability to respond to the moment. And it's what was needed in that moment. And the energy of that action was the teaching. It was the transmission, right? Then after I called him down, he left the table, he went into his room, and I called him down a little later when he had some time to experience the consequences, which then he can reflect on the principles that I embody, the standards I hold, right? And then it sends a message to others at the table, the rest of the family, that again, we don't speak to each other like this, and it becomes obvious what's the distorted energy. So precision. The other one there that I named, containment, boundaries, protection. You can see how just in this one example, it's all there, right? Protecting the sacred space of the dinner table, right? And it's because of those boundaries that the feminine actually feels more safe. This is something that the boundaries, the consequences, I mentioned this before, consequences reveal a boundary. If it wasn't for the consequence of removing access from the sacred space, then there would be no boundary there, right? So the boundary is actually revealed through the consequence, which in this case was the removal of access, right? Access denied, right? Not as a punishment, but as a reflection for one's actions. So boundaries then actually protect the sacred space. They contain that sacred space. They can hold. And because I don't collapse when there's that storm or turmoil or reactivity, it's containment. I'm not collapsing into his aggression or his retaliation or whatever it is, the drama, right? It's just this, just like, it's like you're inserting yourself in this moment with a very precise activity, right? Very precise action, right? It's clean. I don't get messy, right? And then just like that, it's done. It moves on. It's like it never happened. It's not something that I'm holding on to. It's not something that I'm bringing up the next day. It's just, like I said, it's clean, it's clear, it's complete. Completion is another quality, right? That's what I said. I think I used the word finality. It's final, right? Sometimes my kids will try and, what's the word here? Ask for the justification, right? of why did this happen, or they want to explain, which is basically an excuse for their actions. They want to explain. It's kind of like someone wanting to tell their side of the story, right? Where then I come in with the precise action. Might be to break up a fight or an argument, or remove someone from the space who's not playing fairly, whatever it is. And then it's like, but Noah did this, or but Chloe did this, and wants to now tell their side of the story, right, after I've made the decision, right? So it's, no, I've already made the decision, and that's final, right? I don't want to hear your side of the story. I don't want to hear any sort of justification or explanation for that. That's, again, the whole story, the drama, right? So there's a decision that comes from discernment. There's the precise action, right? And if there's the consequence, that then there's another quality here. Follow through. You follow through. You're committed to it, right? It's not something that you say there's going to be a consequence and then you don't follow through. No, that's a fast way to have, your kids or your partner or anyone else, what's the word here? Call your bluff, right? So you have to have that follow through. That follow through after your decision, right? That decisiveness is another quality, right? So the decisiveness to make the decision, right? It's just a clean decision. You're not like weighing out options. It's just, you've got that clarity, the discernment. You make the decision. It's a clean cut decision. And you don't fall back on your word, right? So you have the integrity. You made the decision, you follow through. All of your energy is going in the same direction. You're not divided. There's no hesitation. You don't make a decision and then second guess yourself with the doubt. Oh, did I make the right decision? Okay, maybe I'll go back. Okay, I said there's gonna be a consequence, but then you soften. No, that is softening your boundaries. That's not holding firm boundaries, strong boundaries. That's not containing like the divine masculine does. That's the leakiness, having a leakage, spilling, collapsing, right? Especially when people start using manipulation, guilt. They try and make you feel guilty or doubt yourself, or emotional manipulation, right? It's all the story is just that decision is just made, and then there's the follow through, and you stand your ground. Standing your ground is your boundaries, your containment. And it's really you, it's the masculine, the divine masculine in you, having a spine, standing up for the principles, right? For the standards that you embody, right? So it's not that you're punishing someone, but more that you're raising them to your standards that you embody. It's this quality of the masculine that can see the potential in one, right? So it looks harsh to most people. And that's because most people can't see the potential. The masculine can see the potential. So it says in this example, to my 7-year-old son or 5-year-old son or 9-year-old daughter, there's an energy to it that says sort of like, you're better than this. Like, I'm raising you to the standards. I'm not treating you based off of the limited conditioning, but I'm knowing your potential. I'm knowing that you're up here, and I'm holding you accountable. I'm treating you according to the standards that I know you can live, right? So without those standards, without you raising your standards, without you holding your children to the higher standards, then it's like you're not really raising children, right? They're not really growing up. They're growing old, but they're not growing up. They grow up because you're raising those standards, right? So it's because you see the potential. It's sort of like in a garden, how you stake certain crops, certain plants, because you know the potential, right? The tomato plant is going to grow up and you stake it. Same sort of thing, right? What's another one here? Penetration. So penetration really is sort of like what I was talking about, is seeing that clarity, that sees deeper, that can see the potential, the consciousness that literally penetrates form, right? This is also to do with clarity as well, focus, right? There's no penetration when the mind is scattered, when the mind can't contain that energy. The penetration comes from being able to contain that energy, and it's the clarity that then can focus it, and instead of it being diffuse, like spread out, like this softness, it actually, the consciousness becomes more like laser focused, like a laser beam. And it's this laser beam that concentrates the energy and can focus, it can penetrate it into whatever it is, into that moment, right? These are sometimes when you see that even you can speak, right? When you speak to someone, it's like you can penetrate through the illusion. You can penetrate through the armor and really just cut through the noise, and your words land in their heart, right? That is that's an example of penetration. There's many different examples of it. The vision to penetrate, literally penetrating the vision, right? Or the vision that penetrates form. It can penetrate the form, and it's experiencing the essence of the form, right? That's another example. It can show up in art as well, right? This is really in the transmission of the art, right? Through that penetration, you're able to evoke something in that art, transmit through that art like I said, the words of speaking, but it could also be in poetry, it could be in writing, it can be videos, whatever it is. What are some other qualities here? I'm trying to give you some qualities that are less spoken about, that I haven't really mentioned before in some of the previous videos. This kind of this reverent restraint. It's not a restraint of limitation, but it's a restraint. It's a restraint of discipline. This discipline, but it's coming from reverence. It's actually this discipline, and at this point here, it's this discipline that's actually devotion. To restrain, right? And this is also another, it's very nuanced, because it starts kind of, where is it restraint and where is it a restraint and where is it containment, right? But you see, without that discipline, then you're leaky, you're spilling everywhere. So this restraint, this could be just knowing when to stay silent, right? You can see it's again that clarity, that discernment, that just discerns, and it's why say anything in this moment, right? There's a restraint there, but there's also, it's coming from the clarity that maybe who you're speaking to, they're not ready, they're not open, right? So the clarity can see the other sort of being like a wall. They're not ready to receive this wisdom. So why even speak it? If I speak it, it's like a waste of energy, right? And there's no point. It's fruitless, right? Because they're not ready. So there's a lack of maturity. Again, go back to a garden example because I love them so much. It's the mature plant that bears fruit, right? There's a readiness, there's the evolution, right? So it really doesn't matter what you say, it's just not going to land in that time, in that moment, because the lack of readiness, the lack of maturity, it won't be fruitful, right? So it doesn't matter how wise the words are, it doesn't matter how great the insight is. You can just see that there is a lack of readiness. So there's the restraint. You don't need to speak for the sake of speaking. You don't need to share for the sake of sharing. There's no need to perform. You're not trying to look spiritual or be perceived as wise or all-knowing or whatever it is. There's that restraint with speech. There's the restraint in could be indulging in sort of the story or emotions, right? Not getting carried away in sort of, let's say, charged environment. Perhaps your girlfriend or boyfriend or your wife or your husband, emotionally charged. So there's a restraint, but it's might be perceived from their end that you're being cold or you're being distant. You're not being detached. You're not being avoidant. You're not trying to escape. You're just restraining yourself by not getting involved in the mess, the storm, the drama, right? So this restraint, it's sort of like, can you restrain yourself from indulging in the drama? But you see, if you like indulging in the drama, then you're going to experience suffering, right? So that restraint, it's not like a retreat that you're retreating, but you're just restraining that compulsive activity, which is the conditioning to, it's like, oh, I can't help myself. I just have to, how some people, they just can't help but gossip, right? So they get into it. Next thing you know it, they're identified and they're lost in the sauce and everything is downhill from there, right? Where that restraint, that discipline is the discipline. You don't need to get lost in the drama. You don't need to, feel like, oh, I just can't help myself. That kind of indulgence, that compulsiveness, right? So there's the restraint, which, like I said, it's like that containment. It's like the boundaries, the containment, the discipline, right? It's like how some people, I'll give you an example from my life. For my wife, it's like every day is a reason to like treat the kids to something, like sugary, right? So without that restraint, right, for diet, right, the restraint to restrain yourself from all this processed sugar, without that discipline, then you experience the consequences of living without discipline, right? A lot of people have diabetes and, they're overweight and all this type of stuff, right? The detriments of your health, the decline, the deterioration of your health because not having that discipline. And, a fly right in my mouth. you see how it's so easy to just indulge, where it's like, oh, you know, it's the start of the week, you know, let's put something special, a nice treat in their lunch. And then after school, it's like, but they had a good day, let's treat them to a slushie or an ice cream cone, and now it's Friday, but now it's, you know, the middle of the week, and oh, this is special because, you know, the cousins are over, or, you know, they're at their park with a friend that they never get to see, or every day is like some sort of special occasion that benefits, that allows the discipline to slip. And that's what you experience in life. Without discipline, you're just spilling all over the place and you're scattered, right? So the discipline keeps you focused, right? Keeps you walking, you know, where you want to go based off of your focus, your vision, right? And you see, without that vision, without the focus, without the discipline that keeps you walking in a straight line, so to say, you're scattered, you're all over the place. You're just actually, you're not living consciously, you're not living intentionally. Living intentionally is, okay, here's the vision, there's the focus, I'm walking in this in this line, right? You see the path here, I'm walking right here, right? Without that discipline, without the focus, without the intention behind the movement, then you're pulled in all different directions, right? You're pulled by your compulsiveness, right? The compulsion, the indulgence. Oh, you know, I feel like this, or oh, here's a special occasion. And you see how it actually becomes very destructive, right? It seems very good. It seems like those thoughts are, yeah, hey, let's get a slushie because it's hot. And well, I mean, if you're in a heat wave and you're having slushies and ice creams, all of a sudden it's like, okay, we can find the middle way, right? The moderation. We don't want to be so extreme. You don't want to be a breatharian or something like this and be so restrictive, but you also don't want to be the other extreme where there's no discipline at all and there's just this, you know, spill, right? That kind of spilling over. You'll see the reflection of the spilling over in your body. Your body will look like a spillover as well, right? So that discipline, when it's lacking in life, you'll just feel that you're scattered. You're all over the place. You're being pulled in every direction, and you're being pulled by these desires that are coming up, right? So without that discipline, then you're just basically living compulsively, not consciously. What else did we mention? This one's kind of related to precision, but it's like exactness to or we can say like right timing, right? It's kind of like, it's kind of connected to restraint, right? So I'll give you the example before of like sitting quietly or standing quietly when friends are, I don't know, arguing about something, right? In the heat of the moment, that's not when you just, hey, let me just drop some wisdom here. Let me just give you some wise words. No, because it's like, it's not the right environment. It's not the scene. Those words aren't going to land, right? You can just already see that it's not the right timing, right? So the exactness, but it also is expressed as the right timing, right? So you might just, you know, just know that in the certain times where someone is like, you don't even need to say anything. They just need a hug. And you don't say anything, you just give them a hug. And that exactness, it's like you're just dropping. It's so potent. You sometimes use this example. It's like an essential oil. It's so potent. It just needs like one drop. One drop is better than sort of some sort of dilution, a diluted equivalent that's not, it's lacking the essence, right? But the essential oil is the essence. So you just need one thing, right? It's just one thing. It could be like one line, like a one-liner. You just say something. It could be one word. It could be no words, and that's it. It could be one action, the hug, or just to touch someone on their back, or a handshake, or just a gaze, or a smile, whatever it is. But this sort of exactness, like I said, it's very related to precision, but it's a little bit more nuanced. It's different, related, but not the same. So that exactness, the right timing, is another quality, right? What's another one here? Getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. That's clarity, we've mentioned that. That's pretty obvious. Penetration is a little bit more nuanced. The restraint was another more nuanced one. Follow through, I think I mentioned that. Follow through, commitment, honor, discipline, standards. We already mentioned that before in another video. But really embodying those standards, being the standard. That's how you're able to basically see the potential in others, is because you know your potential. You're actualizing your potential, and that's why you basically know that the other is you, right? So you can hold them to a higher standard because you know their potential. How do you know their potential? Because you are them, right? They are you, and that's the potential that you are actualizing. So you're able to hold them to the higher standard because you know what's possible. You're literally the mirror to them. You're reflecting their possibility. You're the reflection of their potential, right? So that's why it's, again, you only know the way because you've walked the way, right? So it's something that you're living, you're embodying, you're walking the talk. This is not conceptual for you, it's experiential. So you're always speaking from experience, right? Just like I am, right? Speaking from experience isn't something that I'm making up. It's not something that I've read or heard. Literally giving you everyday examples from my life that I'm living, right? So it's obviously not conceptual, it's experiential, right? So that's how you're able to hold others to those standards. And you're holding others to the standards that you embody. You're already the embodiment of those standards, right? So it's not something that is some sort of ideal, because that would make it some sort of thing that's like imaginary, but it's actually something that you're living. And you're able to be the example in their life. They see these standards, they come to learn these standards and know them through your living example, because you're embodying these standards. Another one related to standards, related to discipline, is principle, right? To be the masculine is like a man of principle, where it's not just values, right? Someone say, oh, I value my family, or I value respect, or I value truth, right? That's one thing. That's like, could be all talk, right? But is there actually the integration? Is it lived? Principles are values lived, right? They're values that are embodied, right? When you're a man of principle, then people can feel it. They come to know you through those principles that you embody, right? Just like the example at the table there, right? The principle is, if we don't speak like that to each other, right? We speak respectfully to each other, right? So that was the principle in real time, we can say, if you want to talk it, you want to speak to it like that, where it's not some sort of idea. A lot of people have these ideas, these values, but in the heat of the moment, they actually they actually lack integrity. They don't, how do I say this? They don't embody those values. They abandon them, right? That's where there's the lack of integrity. So they'll say something like, I value my family, but then they come to this decision. What are they going to do? Hang out with their family, do a movie night with their family at home, or, you know, I don't know, they get a call and they're off to the bar and they're, you know, boozing with their friends and getting drunk, right? So you can see that in that example, it requires discipline, right? It requires you to actually live those values, to be those values, right? It's sort of where the rubber meets the road, that expression, right? Do you collapse under the pressure, right? The pressure is your friends, you know, pressuring you. Come on, the peer pressure, come on, right? Or do you have principles, right? Principles also show up when no one's looking, right? It's not like you have something to prove to someone. These principles are lived, right? This integrity, this coherence is lived, right? When no one's looking, when there's no audience, there's no one to perform in front of, right? It just becomes what you are, these principles, right? And they literally leave an imprint in those who you are surrounding yourself with, those who are around you. They rub off. These principles rub off. And it's something that if someone is just living with you, that's the transmission right there. They can just get a sense of who you are by how you live when you've embodied these principles, when you've embodied that value. It's like you stand for something, right? But when you collapse, when you don't stand for something, then you're always collapsing, right? In the heat of the moment, right? You say that you value justice, and here's your chance to stand up and do what's just in this moment. Or do you fold like a deck of cards or run away like a coward, right? Because it takes courage, it takes discipline, right? That's what I mean by principles are really the values lived, right? Especially when no one's watching you, especially when no one is gonna give you some sort of recognition, applause, clap for you, right? This is where the divine masculine, when embodied, it's not flashy. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's the silent power, right? It's the silent power. It's not trying to prove itself. Here's the example, because it's such a popular movie. I've watched it so many times with my kids. The new one, The Lion King, right? It's like the king, Mufasa. He's got his presence, right? It's a quiet power. It's that majesty, right? It's not loud, it's not flashy. But you see how Scar, he's like the tyrant. He's like the, you know, bitter, jealous, evil brother. Or whatever they were. I don't know if they're brothers or cousins. It's loud. It's trying to, what's the word here? Overcompensate, right? So you see, it's always trying to prove, right? And they're always chasing power, right? The divine masculine doesn't chase power because he embodies power. The divine masculine is not trying to prove himself because he knows who he is in his heart, right? So all that performance and, doing things for recognition and applause and awards and rewards. It's like, you're done with that. You're done with that. You're not performing. People perform when they lack that presence, and that presence is the power, and that's what's felt. That's what commands, is the presence. That's why it doesn't need to be loud and aggressive and overcompensate with a lot of noise and activity. But when he moves, that power, right, that precision, that focus, that exactness, the right timing, then it's like, whoa, where did that come from, right? But it's this still authority that is also related to the containment. It's that authority and that stillness, the presence that actually contains that chaos, right? It's not trying to control it, not trying to overpower it, not trying to dominate it, but it contains it. And it's in that containment that people actually feel safe, especially when they're, let's say, children, like my boys or daughter, who push the limits and want to find those boundaries. They want to feel those boundaries to sort of test the divine masculine, right? So your kids want to test you. Your wife, your girlfriend, your partner wants to test you to actually feel those boundaries, right? How people say, you're really testing my limits. You're pushing your boundaries, right? They want to feel that boundary. And when you stand your ground, when you don't move, when you're unshakable, that's actually what they long to feel, right? The divine feminine wants to feel the unshakable, this is not a word, unshakableness. She wants to feel that you are unshakable, right? Because it's when she feels that you're unshakable, that you're immovable, that then she feels, okay, there's some strength here. This is the strength that I want to feel. This is the strength that she wants to feel as, in the divine masculine. She wants to feel the strength of the divine masculine, that she can't move. No matter how much chaos, how much, flow and power, how much she moves, the divine masculine is not moved, right? Immovable, unshakable. And that's your presence, right? So that is also an example of containment, how just your presence contains the space, how you can feel it containing the environment, the field, and people will feel safe in your presence when they feel that containment. What's another one here? Let's maybe end with one more. That containment, in that example, the boundaries, I think I mentioned this, but we'll end it with this. It's just the clean consequences, right? So they're not consequences to flex your authority. They're not consequences to sort of dominate, how some people are doing it performatively, right? How people say, I'm just going to do this to send a message to everyone, right? To do something to sort of, again, it's an overcompensation, right? Performance is always an overcompensation for lack of presence. When you have the presence, it's like that presence says more than any words can, right? So you let the presence speak for you, right? But those who aren't embodying that presence, then they always have to perform, right? So they're going to perform. They're going to say more than they have to. They're going to speak more like loudly, more noise than they have to, right? And that's the distortion, right? They're gonna have to over-explain themselves, justify. It's gonna come with a big story. It's just messy, right? And you can see right there, it's already this leakage in power. When you're contained, you don't leak power. You actually see that it's actually more efficient. You say less, you do less, right? And yet it's got this authority behind the words. It's got this authority behind the actions, right? Because you're embodying power. You're not leaking it. So those are some more nuanced qualities of the divine masculine, and I hope I gave you enough examples from my life to help ground some of these things that are typically very abstract ideas for people. They're abstract because they're conceptual. They're conceptual because one hasn't really been initiated. They haven't crossed through from conceptual to experiential, right? Which is really what I invite you into. That initiation is transformation, right? So it's one thing to be talking about truth. There's another thing to be walking in truth, to be living truth, as I say. So if you're ready to stop talking about this and start living it, experiencing it as yourself and the life that you live, then join me in living truth.